Courage is being able to face that which you want to flee from the most. And I think when we talk about courage, we tend to think about it in a more conventional sense, kind of picturing somebody running into a burning building and pulling somebody out. And true enough, that's some heroic shit right there. However, there are so many people walking around suffering on a day to day basis, trying to deal with past trauma, past pain, feeling completely isolated, feeling completely disconnected from themselves and from other people, struggling in their bodies, struggling in their relationships, struggling in their jobs, and not knowing where to go with it. And I suppose one of the ways people cope with suffering is by finding coping mechanisms, and these can take so many different forms. I mean, you can look at things like drink, drugs, food, sex, porn, phone, shopping, whatever it is that somebody can find to fill that void that they are experiencing within them. Likewise, some people just create a need for perfectionism, or they find an addiction to work solves having to face into the feelings that they find intolerable, the suffering that they just don't want to acknowledge is there. And I suppose the people that I work with have recognized that their lives are no longer working for them, and they are willing to take a risk, to be vulnerable, to reach out and to acknowledge the fact that they don't want to do this anymore, that they want to, I suppose, reach a higher vibration, that they want to become more evolved, that they want to transcend what has happened in the past or what they're currently experiencing and live a more wholehearted life. And I think Brené Brown does a lot of fantastic work on courage and vulnerability and being able to show up for your life and manage to stay open hearted despite the fact that bad things happen and that the world doesn't really support, well, the culture doesn't really support wholehearted living. And it's tough because, I mean, basically, you're challenging coping mechanisms that you've possibly used for a lifetime. You're challenging ways of thinking, ways of behaving. You're trying to release your attachments, to things like wealth and success and all of these things that you thought would bring you happiness and that would absolve you from the inner sense of kind of inadequacy and low self-worth that you experience on a day-to-day basis, but which ultimately don't really help you at all. It's also being able to acknowledge some of the things that have caused you so many years of shame or anger or resentment, being able to open up those feelings and tolerate them and recognize them and release them, as opposed to carrying them round with you all the time. And it's having a faith that things can get better. And when you're in the midst of a struggle, when you have been down for so long, holding on to faith, holding on to a belief that things will get better or can potentially get better is huge. Just being able to show up every day, being able to, believe that there is a greater good, being able to believe that you have the potential to reach your true authenticity, to wade beyond all of the things that have happened, all of the conditioning, all of the small minded ways that we develop of thinking that kind of help us survive but ultimately don't help us flourish. And you decide that you're going to challenge them, that you want something more from your life, that you want to achieve what it is that most people only ever dream of, and that's peace of mind and contentment and satisfaction and joy and a sense of purpose, and I mean, it's about being curious about, both your good and your bad side. It's about not being afraid of the darker aspects of yourself, not being afraid to live wholeheartedly, because ultimately that's what it's about. So if you are teetering on the edge and you're not really sure as to whether or not you can take the risk, I want to tell you today that you can and that you should, because I mean, the courage that is required, it pays off. 100 times over, because creating self-awareness, building a life that is worth living is so important and should be available to every single person. So if you'd like to work on this with me, get in touch with me on my website. It's fundamentals.ie.